he has made what I would call some drastic U-turns when it comes to the whole plan for how on earth this government is going to achieve net zero. It was quite a long speech, as you've just been hearing some of the highlights in the headlines there. In essence, petrol and diesel cars. Some of the deadlines there move from 2030 to 2035, similar as well with new gas boilers. It's talking about the off-grid oil boilers as well. Their deadlines there are going to be pushed back. You're no longer going to require homeowners and landlords and all the rest of it to meet those energy efficiency targets. And as well, good news for the poorest households, because they will now be exempt from the ban on new gas boilers from 2035. Lots of help as well for households when it comes to some of the funds available, 50% rises in some of them. Let's just remind ourselves as well of some of the other things that he treated us to.
The debate about how we get to net zero has thrown up a range of worrying proposals. And today I want to confirm that under this government, they will never happen. The proposal for government to interfere in how many passengers you can have in your car, I've scrapped it. The proposal that we should force you to have 7 different bins in your home, I've scrapped it. The proposal to make you change your diet and harm British farmers by taxing meat, or to create new taxes to discourage flying or going on holiday, I've scrapped those too. And nor will we ban new oil and gas in the North Sea, which would simply leave us reliant on expensive imported energy from foreign dictators like Putin. We will never impose these unnecessary and heavy-handed measures on you, the British people.
What did he do? Was you chatting along at home? Scrapped it. I can tell you that. The goings-on tonight have divided opinion. And to debate this, I am joined tonight by the author of Not Zero, Ross Clark, and also former Labour Special Advisor, Paul Richards. Good evening, gentlemen. If I can I just start by rewinding? Because I want to ask the question about whether or not it was right for this country, the UK, to have basically enshrined the net zero target into law in the first place. I'll direct that initially to you, Ross.
Yeah, well, the whole net zero project has been a sort of triumph of hope over reality. It's been about government setting targets, deadlines and so on, without any idea of how they can be fulfilled, what it will cost, what the impact will be on individuals, families, businesses and so on. And what Rishi Sunak has done today is really just inject a little bit more reality into that debate and say, well, look, yes, the costs do matter. And yes, we do need to look at the impact on people because, you know, frankly, the policies as they were going to impose huge costs and inconvenience on ordinary people who might find themselves driven off the road, unable to heat their homes properly and facing bills of tens of thousands of pounds to upgrade their homes.
Paul?
Well, he's run the white flag up, hasn't he, in terms of net zero? He claims he wants the target, but he's abolished all the means to achieve it. He has made us all a little bit smaller on the world stage. We've thrown away whatever advantage we had as a world leader. And the biggest loser today is British business, because business, as you will know, Michelle, craves stability and needs to know what to do in terms of long-term planning. By chopping and changing like this, he's thrown all of that stability out of the window. He talks about bravery in his speech. Where was the bravery to hold a general election? That's what we were expecting from when the announcement came that he was speaking. He could have put this to the people. He's got no mandate for any of this stuff. Nobody voted for him. And he's even flunked that.
I want to come back to you, Paul, in just a second about that particular business question. But Ross, on this whole kind of world stage notion, the fact that we, Britain, should somehow be leading the way, racing even faster than people like the EU in some cases to achieve these targets. I mean, we are responsible for about 1% of some of these emissions. Do we really need to be pioneering and leading the way?
Well, Britain cannot tackle climate change, reduce carbon emissions on its own. As you say, we're less than 1% of global emissions. But when we started this, or when Britain set this net zero target in 2019, it was with the idea that would inspire other countries to follow suit. Now, we're 4 years down the line. there's, I think, about 17 other countries have legally committed themselves to reach net zero by 2050 or some other date. The world's two biggest emitters, US and China, have completely refused to set legally binding targets. They have aspirations, but not legally binding targets. And, frankly, what we were doing, what we're still doing to some extent, is to sacrifice our own industry, sacrifice our own living standards when others are not following suit. And the idea that, British business was somehow going to benefit from net zero promise, I'm sorry, it's just completely ludicrous. You look where the green jobs have gone in the past decade. They've gone to China or to the US now that Joe Biden is, pumping these huge subsidies into US businesses, green businesses. The green economy in the UK, as measured by the Office of National Statistics, has hardly grown in a whole decade of, these net zero targets and so on. It's simply not creating jobs in Britain. But what net zero is doing is piling on costs on ordinary people and piling costs on business. And you look at, a company like German BASF, that's a prime example. German company, it's announced last year that it's not going to invest in Europe anymore. It's building a £10 billion plant in China. Why? Because energy is cheaper there. It says energy is far too expensive in Europe now to justify investment there. And why is that? In part, it's due to net zero promises and which have driven up energy prices.
And final word to you on this, Paul. Back on your business point there, to echo some of the things that Ross was just saying. Absolutely, I agree with your sentiment earlier about stability and certainty and all the rest of it. But there's no point in having certainty of a direction of travel if you've got a bankrupt population in the meantime that can't afford to spend their money there anyway.
Well, Ross mentioned China and he mentioned the US, and what both of those countries have done in very different ways is invest in their industries so that they can capitalise on the crisis and actually turn the crisis into an opportunity. And that's one thing this government under Sunak and his predecessors have completely failed to do. So if you look at Biden's intervention, the Inflation Reduction Act, billions of pounds of taxpayers' money going in to help the economy and create green jobs, which then, of course, the money comes back. It goes round again. People have jobs, they pay taxes. The exchequer grows as a result of this kind of intervention. So that's what we're lacking in this country. We lack leadership already, but now he's run the white flag up. No other country is going to want to invest here, and no other country is going to want to take our lead because we've just decided to march in the opposite direction. It's a really sad day for Britain on the world stage today, Michelle.
Cool, blimey. Well, there you go. Different opinions on that. But for now, Ross Clark and Paul Richards, thank you for your insight. I'll throw that open to you guys at home. A sad day for the UK on the world stage. Do you agree with that final sentiment there? I've got to say, Peter, this notion of, Britain's got to be this on the world stage, we've got to be that on the world stage. Well, actually, I think what Britain's got to be doing is making sure we're looking after the citizens of this country first and foremost and not bankrupting them.
Well, I'm very sorry to break this to anybody who thinks differently, but there is no world stage, and most people in countries abroad think very little of Britain. They don't know much about us, they don't care much about us. We long ago ceased to be the major world power, which some people still weirdly imagine that we were. They're not looking saying, the British are destroying all their industries, the British are imposing ridiculous costs upon themselves, let's do the same. Because they're the British and they have the Union Jack. That sentiment has not gone through the mind of anybody, anywhere, ever. And it's a fantasy that we can lead the world. I remember the nuclear disarmament people used to say the same thing, that if Britain would only get rid of its nuclear weapons, then obviously everybody else would, like the Russians and the Americans. Nonsense even then, when we were a more important country than we are now. So that's no use. It's quite bizarre. I mean, let's assume for a moment that the arguments of the net zero people are correct and that we are all doomed unless we hugely reduce the world output of carbon dioxide, then we really have to turn to China and to India and to the United States, which produce immensely more of it than we do. We in this country have in the past 15 years, I've watched it happen near me, closed down and then blown up large numbers of coal-fired power stations, while the Chinese have been building probably about 20 or 30 times as many.
Kerry
What good did that do?
Well, what good did it do? You tell me. Kerry Dingle, what do you make to Rishi's U-turns, ideas, whatever you want to call them tonight?
Well, I'd say it's better than 'twas, step in a better direction, but it doesn't go nearly far enough, in my view, because I do see net zero as willful self-impoverishment. To be honest. And I think we have to... I was shocked by a couple of things he said. I mean, he said something really stupid when he said, yes, of course I'm for net zero. I realise, the dangers of climate change. Just look at Libya last week. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, that's a failed state, failed infrastructure and a kleptocracy.
Well, it's failed because his predecessor, David Cameron,
example. But for me, what is the point of all the pain that our green elites are trying to impose if, and Peter's mentioned some of it, it's not going to do us any good. It's just going to do harm and make us less able to deal with what climate change does throw at us, because we will need more energy for a start.
Well, I can tell you, there was criticism of Rishi Sunak being inaction man. Do you remember that? As he suddenly sprung into action, so Lindsay Hoyle, he was furious at Rishi Sunak's approach today, the way that he did it. Of course, he was pushed into doing this at this time because of leaks around his ideas and all the rest of it. But I want to know your thoughts.